Jane, and welcome to the 66th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. The series was set up to elaborate on my book on decolonizing the mind, and because of the current world situations, I went into the first 16 episodes into Palestine, and then the last episode much about world affairs. But I'm going to go back to the basics of the book, and I'll discuss today philosophy and specifically what is knowledge. But I will touch upon the world situations because past week have been a few important developments to look into and to discuss shortly. The first one is Putin gave a speech last week. Why? On November 19th, six ballistic missiles produced by the United States were fired into Russia, and 2 days later, a combined missile assault involving British military systems and the US, and they attacked military facilities in the Russian Federation in the Bryansk and Kursk region. And Putin said that if that would happen, if NATO would use long-term missiles to attack Russia, then the regional conflict will become a global conflict. And he says we consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow to use their weapons against our facilities. And in case of an escalation of aggressive actions, we will respond decisively and in a mirror-like manner. I recommend that the ruling elites of the countries that are hatching plans to use their military contingents against Russia seriously consider this. What is he saying? He's saying that now that you have decided, we know that you supported Ukraine with weapons and funding, etc., and military personnel, but now if you use these long-term weapons, then you are directly involved because these weapons can't be operated without your full support, technically, intelligence-wise, with your officers involved, and that means that we will use our long-term missiles to get back at you. And that is what he did. And they struck a military facility, but now he's saying, I can strike any military facility in Europe, and for that matter in the US, if these kind of attacks continue. So he might hit Britain or France or the Netherlands. So this is a real escalation of the conflict. Another escalation took place with the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, its spokesperson, Behrouz Kamalvandi, condemned a resolution that was passed at the United Nations Nuclear Agency against the country's peaceful atomic program. And he says that Tehran will adopt various measures, including installations of a series of new and advanced centrifuges, as well as increasing nuclear enrichment capacity. Now, nuclear enrichment capacity is the capacity to produce nuclear weapons. And former Iranian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and advisor to the Supreme Leader Khamenei, his name is Mohammad Javad Larijani, he says, Iran can obtain military capabilities in 84 hours and we can reduce it to 24 hours. Any attack on our nuclear infrastructure will result in a new policy that the rest will not like. So he's saying, we are already there. We can produce nuclear weapons in 2 days and if needed in 1 day. So if you attack our facilities and you go nuclear, we can go nuclear. And there was a fatwa in Iran that prohibited the use of nuclear weapons, but now that can change and things can become very different. And then another item that I saw on one of the websites of Iran is this. They had a military drill a two-day drill, a large-scale drill involving 60,000 members of the Iranian Bashi volunteer force. And the code name was Towards Al-Quds, and it took place in the southwestern province of Khuzestan. And it said that the drill aims to improve the Bashi forces' preparedness and combat ability for potential real-world scenarios. What are they saying? Look at the name, Towards Al-Quds. Look at this force of volunteers. When October 7 started, they opened up a register for volunteers who wanted to go to Palestine and physically help liberate Palestine. Millions of people signed for it. And I've told you time and again that bombing Israel, if Iran bombs Israel, it's just a retaliation, but it is not the end of the occupation. You won't end the occupation with just bombing. What needs to end the occupation if they actually reinvade occupied Palestine, and the Palestinians would need help from the Muslim communities in the Middle East. But the point is, if you have a massive force invading occupied Palestine and liberating it, these people need to be trained. And what surprised me about this message is that they are actually being trained. You don't get this in the media now, but it's good to pay attention that this is coming. So let's go back to the theory of knowledge, epistemology, and I'll discuss the Eurocentric view and the DTM view of knowledge. So first, let's start with the question, why is epistemology so important? Epistemology, the theory of knowledge, provides us with guidelines about what is valid knowledge and what is not. And valid knowledge makes a distinction between true and false and between right and wrong. Valid knowledge is codified in science and entrusts authority to knowledge producers. Valid knowledge is scientific knowledge. People act daily on valid knowledge. This knowledge gives them rules on how to act and how to behave. Valid knowledge gives you the assurance that your acts and behaviors are justified. Invalid knowledge does the reverse. You don't want to act and behave on invalid knowledge. Now let's go to how Eurocentrists look at knowledge. And there are many books and they have the same kind of outline. One of the books which I used by, in fact, an Indian social scientist, he defines science. He says the purpose of science is to create scientific knowledge. And he says scientific knowledge refers to a generalized body of laws and theories to explain a phenomenon or behavior of interest that are acquired through the scientific method. And then he says laws are observed patterns of phenomena or behaviors, while theories are systematic explanations of the underlying phenomena or behavior. So science explains laws, natural laws, social laws, and the scientific methods refers to a standardized set of techniques for building scientific knowledge. So how to make valid observation, how to interpret results, and how to generalize those results. Scientific inquiry may take one of two possible forms, inductive or deductive. In inductive research, the goal of a researcher is to infer theoretical concepts and patterns from observed data. So you observe the data and you build a theory on the data. In deductive research, the goal of the researcher is to test concepts and patterns known from theory using new empirical data. This deductive means you have a theory, say, gravity makes an object fall with this speed. So that is your theory. Now you could do research where based on the theory you do a test and see if it works. And if it works, you're testing a theory. Deductive is testing theory and inductive is building theory. So, hence, inductive research, he says, is called theory building, and deductive research is theory testing. Now he explains what is this scientific method, and he says it has four characteristics: reliability, meaning others should be able to independently replicate or repeat a scientific study and obtain similar, if not identical, research. So you do something in such a way that others can repeat it. Precision, theoretical concepts which are often hard to measure must be defined with such precision that others can use those definitions to measure those concepts and test that theory. So if you want to test a theory, you should make the theory in such a way that you can measure the concept. Falsifiability, a theory, this comes from Popper, a philosopher, a theory must be stated in a way that it can be disproven. It's another way of saying you test a theory to see if it's true or false. Theories that cannot be tested or falsified are not scientific theory, and any such knowledge is not scientific knowledge. A theory that is specified in imprecise terms of those whose concepts are not accurately measurable can be tested and is therefore not scientific. And then parsimony, which means when there are multiple explanations of a phenomenon, scientists must always accept the simplest or logically most economic explanation. The concept is called parsimony or Occam's razor. Parsimony prevents scientists from pursuing overly complex or outlandish theories with endless numbers of concepts and relations that may explain a little bit of everything but nothing in particular. And then he says there's a research cycle. In the observation phase, we observe a natural or social phenomenon, event, or behavior that interests us. In the rationalization phase, we try to make sense of the observed phenomena, event, or behavior by logically connecting the different pieces of the puzzle that we observe, which in some cases may lead to the construction of a theory. Finally, in the validation phase, we test our theories using a scientific method through a process of data collection and analysis, and in doing so, possibly modify or extend our initial theory. And now he says, the scientific method is not different when you use for knowledge about nature and knowledge about human beings. He says, science can be grouped into two broad categories: natural sciences and social sciences. Natural science is the science of naturally occurring objects or phenomena such as light, objects, matter, earth, celestial body, or the human body. Natural science can be further classified into physical science, earth science, life science, and others. Physical sciences consist of disciplines such as physics, the science of physical objects, chemistry, the science of matter, and astronomy, the science of celestial objects. Earth science consists of disciplines such as geology, the science of earth. Life sciences include disciplines such as biology, the science of human bodies, and botany, the science of plants. And in contrast, social science is the science of people, a collection of people such as groups, firms, society, or economies, and the individual or collective behavior. Social sciences can be classified into disciplines such as psychology, the science of human behavior, sociology, the science of social groups, and economics, the science of firms, markets, and economies. So you have this distinction, natural and social science. And the scientific method uses the same method to study both areas. And then he says, if you have theories, a theory might have a bias, especially social theories. And then he says, theories may have implicit cultural assumptions, for example, whether they apply to individualistic or collective cultures, temporal assumptions, whether they apply to early stage or later stages of human behavior, spatial assumptions, whether they apply to certain localities but not to others. If a theory is to be properly used or tested, all of these implicit assumptions that form the boundaries of that theory must be properly understood. Unfortunately, theorists rarely state their implicit assumptions clearly, which leads to frequent misapplication of theories to problem situation in research. So what is he saying? He's saying, suppose a white man studies African society. Then he poses himself as an objective scientist studying, let's say in anthropology, studying these societies. But his study might be biased uh, because he might have implicit assumptions about how we look at Africans. And he says, now that thing is a bias which can be corrected. It's just a matter of stating the implicit assumption, and then you remove the bias. Now, this is the general theoretical basis of knowledge production in the West, which has been universalized. Whether you're in a university in Ghana or in Caracas or in Japan or in Amsterdam or in New York, you get the same stuff. This is basically it. And if you look at the two major schools of the European Enlightenment, liberalism and Marxism, they have the same methodology. Marx says sense perception must be the basis for all science. Natural science will in time incorporate into itself the science of man, just as the science of man will incorporate into itself natural science. There will be one science. The social reality of nature and human natural science, or the natural science of man, are identical terms. So everybody who has gone through university is being taught this and learned this at a very already in the first year. So what can possibly be wrong with this canon? So here comes DTM epistemology. And here's the first thing. In the Eurocentric epistemology, they don't distinguish between knowledge and lies. So it is not able to recognize lies that presents itself as knowledge. It doesn't acknowledge the colonization of the mind. The Eurocentric epistemology uses the same research methods for knowledge about human society and natural world, and thus is not able to grasp the essence of human relations in its epistemology. And it is based on two-value logic, true or false, so it's not able to understand the logic of social and natural processes. So, how do I define knowledge in the DTM theoretical framework? I say knowledge are the insights and understanding about the natural and social world as expressed in concepts that describes and explains certain aspects of the social and natural world. So the concept is the basic unit of knowledge. And the concept, in my view, consists of 5 elements: terminology, observation, analysis, theory, and ethics. Let's take the case of Columbus. In the case of Columbus, the terminology in the Eurocentric narrative is used is discovery. Columbus discovered the Americas. In the terminology of the people of Abya Yala, as Latin America is now called, and Americas are now called, they talk about a crime against humanity when they refer to Columbus. So the terminology tells you the big difference about the two systems of epistemology, DTM and Eurocentrism. The second element is observation of facts. So Eurocentrism selects the observations regarding the misguided journey of Christopher Columbus, who thought he was finding a route to Asia, India, and thought that he had arrived in India. He didn't know that he ended in another part of the world. So in the Eurocentric narrative, they leave out all the brutal acts of genocide against the indigenous people, the illegal occupation of the land, and the ensuing transatlantic kidnapping and massive enslavement of Africans by Europeans. These are to assess what Columbus did is different from Eurocentrism that only looks at the journey, and DTM that looks at what the journey started. Now, the third element of a concept is analysis. So in the Eurocentric narrative, the voyage of Columbus is about science. The curiosity of finding a new route to Asia led to the discovery of new lands. So they're speaking from the position of the Europeans. But the analysis of the people of Abya is that the Europeans, because of greed, committed brutal acts of genocide and massive enslavement of the indigenous people with the occupation of their land. Speaking from their position, they see a crime against humanity and not science. And then the fourth aspect is theory. So the journey of the theoretical assessment of Columbus is that this was the beginning of the rise of modernity, progress, science, technology. In the DTM perspective, it was the decline of humanity and world civilization. And then the last thing, ethics. Ethics is left out of knowledge production in Eurocentrism. Because then knowledge is about true and false, not about right and wrong. But we include right and wrong in knowledge. So ethics is about an appreciation of what happened to the Americas, and Eurocentrism led to the 600 statues being erected for Columbus. And that's an ethical point of view. You value it, and that's why you put a statue. And the people of Abya bring down those statues because they don't want to honor a criminal who was guilty of genocide. So, a British philosopher, Bertrand Russell, says our knowledge of truth has an opposite, namely error. Yes, that's true, but an error could be corrected, while a lie should be opposed. So if we say the opposite of knowledge, the Eurocentric knowledge, are lies, not errors. Yes, errors is an element of knowledge. You can make an error. An error is a false statement in an effort to find the truth. But a lie is a false statement in an effort to block the truth. So if you want to look at the opposite of knowledge, then Eurocentrism comes up with error while we come up with lies. So if you use a terminology and you're searching for the truth, you develop a terminology that is an adequate representation of the object of knowledge. So if you talk about Columbus, then you have to take all these facts of Columbus into account and use a term that represents what really happened. And if you make an error, you correct it. But if you produce a lie, you intentionally come up with a concept that is not an adequate representation, yet you use an inadequate term because you want to paint a different picture of the object that doesn't correspond with reality. And observations, if you do science in a proper way for DTM, you take all relevant acts into account that relates to the concept. If you make an error, you mistakenly leave out facts, but once you realize that, you make a correction and include the facts. But if you produce a lie, you select facts that fits into your concept and intentionally leaves out or twists the facts that contradict your concept. An analysis offers a framing and a storylines that makes us understand the concept and understand all the facts. And in search of truth, you develop a framing and storyline that matches the facts and provides a logical explanation. If you make an error in the storyline, you correct it by adapting the storyline so it matches the facts and logic. But if you produce a lie, you intentionally develop a storyline that matches your concept but manipulates the facts and logics so as to suit the concept. If you need to fantasize, you just put fantasies in the storyline. And then the theory. A theory is a collection of interrelated concepts that provides a bigger picture of the natural and social reality. So in search of the truth, you put your concept in the context of a theory that provides a factual and logical extension of the storyline of the concept. And if you make an error, you correct it by looking for a theory that better matches the facts and logics of the bigger narrative. If you produce a lie, you select a theory that extends the storyline of your concept despite the facts and the ethics that goes against the theory. And the concept contains ethics, a value judgment about what is right or wrong, good or bad, And if you search the truth, you acknowledge the ethics, make it explicit, and defend your ground. If you make an error, you correct it by acknowledging the ethics, make it explicit, and defend your ground. But if you produce a lie, you hide or disguise the ethic as if your concept is objective and has nothing to do with ethics. So, I'll give you an example. There's a British historian, his name is Hugh Thomas, and he wrote quite a few books on Columbus, the Spanish invasion of Abya, transatlantic slavery. And if you look at that book, you can see the Eurocentrism in the title. One is Rivers of Gold, the Rise of the Spanish Empire from Columbus to Magellan. You know, we would say rivers of blood, because that is what genocide was about. And then the Golden Empire, Spain, Charles V, and the creation of America. We would say the brutal occupation, not of Americas, but of Abya. Yeah, we talk about the brutal occupation. Worlds without ends. The global empire of Philip II, and we would say worlds that have ended because the genocide ended the lives of many people there. So this terminology, observations, you know, he deletes the story of cheating and greed in Columbus and portrays Columbus as, you know, this noble man discovering new land. So the story of cheating and greed is contained in the story of Rodrigo de Triana. You won't have heard the name because it's not in the textbooks of the Columbus story in the West. Now, Rodrigo de Triana was a Morisco, a person of color, and a Christian, and he went with the first journey of Columbus. And the Spanish king had said that the person who first sights land should shout land, land, and then he would get a pension for the rest of his life for 10,000 silver coins. And Rodrigo Triana was in one ship, and there were 3 ships that Columbus went with, and Columbus was another ship. So the guy sees land and shouts, land, land. But then they had a bookkeeper, somebody who took notes of what happened during the journey, and he was with a ship with Columbus, and he wrote down that Columbus first saw land. You know, while it was clear that Columbus didn't shout land, land, even not in the minutes of the journey. But Columbus had told the guy, I saw him first. Obviously, this was just greed and corruption. So Rodrigo Triana didn't get the money. Columbus got the money. So he got so angry with them that he converted to Islam because he saw Christianity as a religion of hypocrisy. In the time of Islamophobia, this is a nice story to share. And then the analysis. So he says, this book considers the first 2 generations of explorers, colonizers, governors, and missionaries who opened the way to Spain's vast American empire, which lasted over 300 years, more than the British, the French, the Dutch, or the Russian equivalents. And DTM would say, our book would consider the first 2 generations of murderers, thieves, barbarians, oppressors, and exploiters of indigenous people of the Americas, of Abya, who carried out the first genocide and colonialism and continued the barbarism for 300 years. The story of kidnapping is presented by him as voluntary cooperation. Columbus kidnapped 7 Tainos, the people who were living there, to bring to Spain to show what kind of people live there. And he presents that kidnapping as if these people voluntarily went with Columbus. And then the theory, and in one of the covers of the book, it says, promoting the book, no one writes better than Hugh Thomas on the heartbreaking clash of civilization that produced the Spanish Empire. Thomas puts his erudition to fine use, analyzing with care and sensitivity the 30 elastic year that utterly refined Western civilization. So it is about the rise of modernity, the rise of Western civilization, and this is what the story of Thomas says, not of barbarism. And then objective, this ethics, he removes ethics from science. Thomas, he says, I've tried in this book to say what happened. In seeking the truth, I have not thought it necessary to speak of outrage on every page. Historians must not look for villains. If one is looking for villains in this matter, and some are, one should certainly indeed look at the royal families more severely than at Jewish one. I'm partly thinking of the rulers of Benin, the kings of Ashanti, Congo, and Dahomey, and the Vili rulers of Luanga, who sold great numbers of slaves over many generations. So he talks about the collaborators in Africa of the transatlantic slavery. He's not talking about the people who were giving the orders, which is the royal families in Europe. So he acts as if he's objective, but in everything he says, he's a defender of colonialism. So next time I will go into philosophy more deeper. I'll discuss Popper, Karl Popper, and other Eurocentric philosophers. But I will take a break, go with vacation, and my next episode will be in 2-3 weeks on December the 16th. Thank you for listening.